And welcome back to Meeting of the Minds. Today we're here with the great Huntington Sharma from Huntington Learning Center. Anne, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here today.
Well, it's great to have you. So we'll take it from the top. Talk about how Huntington Learning Center got started, the mission, everything like that.
Sure. So Huntington started in June of 1977 by Dr. Ray and Eileen Huntington, who actually are my parents. So I sometimes say that I'm actually center number 17. So Huntington started in 1977. Eileen Huntington was a tenured teacher prior to starting Huntington, and Ray was a statistician and a business analyst. They saw a need, they saw gaps, and they thought, let's find the solution. So they started with one Huntington Learning Center in northern New Jersey in 1977. They opened their second learning center in Livingston, New Jersey. And then from 1977 to 1985, they opened 18 locations in the New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia corridor. And then in 1985, they thought, okay, we have the systems, we have the processes, let's take this national. So then Huntington started franchising, and we franchise today, and we believe in franchising. Now, since that first day, you asked about the mission. Since day one in June of 1977, our mission was to give every student the best education possible. And that is still our guiding light. That's still our mission today. And we base all of our decisions on that mission, which is to give every student the best education possible. Now, we've actually expanded it to a vision as well. And we have a vision of world-class student results and franchisee profitability. We believe by putting the student first, you do well financially. And then that goes back to the mission to give every student the best education possible. So that's how we began. We have been leading the charge for over 44 years, helping students build skills, confidence, and motivation. And our results are tremendous. In 50 hours, so that's a little more than a work week, a student will go up over 2 grade levels in reading and math. So when we're talking mindset, that completely changes their mindset, their motivation, their confidence. And then on the franchisee side, our revenue is 77% higher than our closest competitor. So it works, and the financials are also awesome. Now, think financial, think scholarship, going back to the students right now, when they're trying to get into college, scholarships are so important. In a recent study that we did, the students actually received $71,000 on average each for scholarship opportunities. Now, how did they get that? They get that from a whole host of different areas, but the most important aspect is that SAT and ACT score. And on average, our students will go up 5.4 points on the ACT and 229 points on the SAT. So I talked a bit about how we began. Eileen and Ray saw a problem. They solved it based on a mission. We're a mission-driven company, and we get results. And that's why we're still doing what we're doing 44 years later.
That's excellent. And now talk a little bit about your involvement, how you came to champion the cause, because it's not a given just because parents start something that the child follows in their footsteps.
No, absolutely not. And so my middle name is now Huntington, and I joked, but it's actually true. I was center number 17. So if my parents weren't having a child, they were opening a Huntington Learning Center. So I was in marketing campaigns, quintessential 90s. I was a student at Huntington. I interned there during summers. And then after I graduated from college, I thought, okay, now what? And it was really important for me and for my family that I got a career, I got experience outside of the family business. So for many years, about 8 years or so, I actually was in a different industry. I was in the art industry, production, philanthropy. And I started my career at an auction house. And then from there, I started my own art curatorial firm. And then I started doing fundraising for nonprofits and producing shows. So to date, I've raised millions, $30+ million for nonprofits, produced over 30 shows. So it's given me a lot of experience prior to joining Huntington. And then about 7 or so years ago, my parents and I had a conversation okay, where are we at? What's going on with Huntington? And at that point, we were going through a rebranding campaign. So I came on board first as a consultant, but anything I do, and I think you can hear the passion in my voice, I dive deep and I have to learn everything that I can. So I dove deep. I went through our training process. I visited centers, and then I started full time. And then over the years have worked my way up to president. And I've been president since October of 2019.
Excellent. That's great. And now with your unique experience, I'm sure you were able to bring something unique to the table that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to if you didn't have your experience. Can you talk about that a little?
Absolutely. I think in any business, be it if your last name's on the door or not, the more experience you can bring, the better. And the more opportunity that you can then have that seat at the table and have those conversations, the better. When I started Huntington, I was a bull in a china shop. And I actually wrote about that. I wanted to change everything and everyone overnight. I quickly learned that that is not the way to succeed. It's also not very good from a diplomacy perspective. So I learned that fast. And I think that anyone who's listening, be it a family business or not, you need experience. You need to understand, okay, this was where I failed. This is where I succeeded. This is how I problem solved. This is how we worked well as a team, understanding individual strengths and weaknesses. And then you come together and it's this big puzzle that you have to piece it together. All the pieces are there. It's just how they fit together. So I will say, though, that working with family is extremely rewarding. It has its own set of challenges, but I wouldn't change it for the world. What I have learned and what I continue to learn each and every day from my parents, and I hope they learn something from me and from the team. We have a fabulous team and a fabulous franchise system. I mean, we just keep on learning and growing better together.
That's excellent. And what are some of the mindset lessons and just general philosophy and perspective lessons that your family has passed on to you and that you continue to pass on to other people?
I think the key really is having that grit, understanding that, okay, we will problem solve. And I think, we're a year into COVID, right? So we have tested a lot of limits over the past year. And through that test, we have really shown grit. I've shown grit and leadership. And I think that it's also important to understand that we have to have patience. Things do not change overnight, but you have to then think, okay, how is this going to happen? Where does it fit in? The key in terms of everything is to trust but verify. And that's something my mother taught me very early on. Trust it, but gather the facts. And especially this day and age, it's really important. And you could even be a student. It doesn't matter who you are. You have to gather all of the facts to then assess the situation, to then make the most educated decision. Now, of course, facts can change, and then you have to evolve and figure out what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. In addition, I learned that it's really important to communicate clearly. Some folks really understand when it's verbal communication. Others need to see it written down. Others might need to have to feel it in some capacity. So there are a lot of different ways to communicate with folks. And being a great leader, you have to understand who's your audience, how are they feeling, understanding empathy, showing that you care. But just because someone is chatting at you or airing grievances, you have to be able to step back, remove that emotion, and then make the right decision. It might not be on the time frame that that individual wants, but first you have to gather that information to then make the most educated decision.
That's excellent. And now bringing it to the students. So what are some of the most common either mental mistakes or, as we call them, mindset red flags? Like, are the students mostly comparing themselves too much to other people? Is it overbearing parents? I'm sure it's some combination of a lot of these different things, or obviously parents who don't care as much as they should. What else do I have written down here? They say they're not good test takers. I was a school psychologist. How many parents told me their kids weren't good standardized test takers? Having a fixed mindset, right? Carol Dweck, giving up too easily. What do you see? I'm sure all of the above and then some.
I think it's really important to realize that every child learns differently. And then at Huntington, our goal is to give every student the best education possible. So how we're able to really assess that is we start with an academic evaluation that pinpoints the student's strengths and weaknesses, and then we build a learning plan. So the student may be behind because unfortunately a dog passed away when the child was in kindergarten, and then the child just turned off when they were learning phonics. And then the student was really charismatic and so was able to continue along. And then second grade, all of a sudden there were some serious issues and red flags. That's where we have to go back to where the root of the issue is. Or maybe a grandparent died, or maybe there was a divorce. There could be a host of different scenarios that impact our children, and quite frankly, all of us at different points that we consciously or unconsciously know. And so at Huntington, we're not here to diagnose. We're not here to become the therapist. What we are here to do is to give that student the best education possible. And we go back to where the student is functioning. So that second grader who maybe never learned how to read because the dog unfortunately passed away, when that second grader would come into one of our Huntington Learning Centers, be it in person or online, and now we're online because of COVID, that student would take that academic evaluation. And through the results, we would see that that student is actually at a kindergarten level. We would present the results to that family, and we would build that customized plan. Now, that student who may feel deflated, may have very low self-esteem at this point, you list the names of the characteristics that that child might have at that moment. Because our programs are customized and individualized and start at where the student is functioning, we build up the skills, we build up the confidence, which then helps with the motivation. So we literally change lives overnight. We change from a student who won't make eye contact, won't smile, who after the program, who's already seeing success, seeing that, wow, I can get this right. We change their entire lives. If you're thinking a family might say, well, my child is a poor test taker. Well, what's the real issue? Is there really a reading comprehension issue? In which case we'll find that out through the academic evaluation, and we'll be able to provide the tools for that student to succeed. Now, those are for our families who are Huntington families. We also know that, especially right now in COVID times, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of stuff out there. So we've created free webinars where students, families, education professionals can go on and they can either watch them live, or we have a library of them. And during COVID, we were having webinars 1-2 times a week, and we enlisted professionals, experts in different fields to talk about different topics. So we enlisted an expert who is an expert in mental health, and she talked about anxiety and depression and different signs. So we can leverage different resources to help families, because especially now we understand that there are so many issues out there. However, I will say, and I believe in growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and Carol Dweck is fantastic in terms of that, and her book is great. Actually, I got to see her speak once at an ed tech conference. We can always make generalizations, and we can always say the reasons why something didn't happen, but quite frankly, it's up to the individual, and of course for a family, it's up for the individual and their support system to provide the help, to provide the tools, and Huntington can help with those tools. So I think regardless of the situation, we can help. And if we are not the right provider, it's our ethical duty to inform the family that we're not the right provider for that student.
Excellent, excellent. As you said, as you improve the student's competence, generally speaking, their confidence improves.
Beautiful.
Yes, and also then, like you said, that even if they're struggling with something more mentally, emotionally, or dealing with pressure, that's when you bring in, the way you address that is by bringing in these guest speakers who will speak. How regularly do they speak on these topics?
So this webinar series is it's all online. It's not at our centers. Right. And so during COVID, we were doing them twice a week. Then we brought them down to once a week. Now we're at a cadence where we have webinars every other week. So the one that happened yesterday was on state and standardized exams. because with COVID, of course, a lot of the exams were either postponed or canceled. So we were providing relevant and timely information for our customers.
Excellent, excellent. And yet, because it's so important. I mean, how many parents came to me saying my kid's not good at standardized tests? And it's well, is that really true? Or is it more the fact that they're putting more pressure on themselves? They're letting external factors play a role in the test. There was a student athlete I was working at a local school over here. And so I work with the athletes as well as students, right? For academic mindset and their sports mindset. So with them, they were saying they really want to get into Brown University. They do really well in the practice SATs, PSATs, but then the real SATs, they choke. And I said, well, that sounds identical to our athletes who do well in practice and then choke in competition. And what he revealed to me was that he was focusing too much on getting into Brown, the final test score, letting his parents down, instead of being in the present moment and taking the test. I'm sure you've seen that many, many times.
Yes, well, I hope that you told this person to call 1-800-CAN-LEARN, and we can help them at one of our local locations. We have a bunch of them in that area. Absolutely. And with our programs, it all goes back to practice, practice, practice. And especially with our test prep students, it's really, we want to help them achieve their goals. It's not necessarily mom or dad's goals. It's also the child's, the student, the young adult's goals. So with that student who wants to get into Brown, what we would do, we would have them take an initial test, and then we would conference with not only the parents, but we would bring that child, that young adult, into the initial conference, because we would want him to understand, in order for you to get to whatever the score is, this is what the plan's going to look like. This is how many hours it's going to take. Are you willing to commit that time and do the homework and the hard work, just as the football player has to go into the weight room and I'm not a football person, but lift weights and do all of that stuff. You have to do that too to prep for a test. You have to have mental weights. So what we do is we build that plan for the student, and then we make sure that they take different practice tests throughout the program, so that there isn't that moment when they go into the real test that they might freeze and say, oh my gosh, how do I do that? Now we give them special lucky pencils and different things to do for the test day. Bring a watch, make sure you eat a proper breakfast, et cetera, et cetera. So we really help them so that on that day, they're not going to choke, they're not going to freeze. They're going to be so confident and so excited to take that test and then go to Brown or wherever the school is.
Absolutely. Just like you said, practicing your sports skills and drills, you don't practice it until you get it right. You practice it until you can't get it wrong. And as you said, it's really that holistic approach. It's what you eat. It's going to sleep. It's making sure you've had all the practice. So it all ties in together. And if you're neglecting the nutrition or the rest or the mindset or the academic, the scholastic piece, you're missing something. It's got to be complete.
Exactly.
I love it. Now speak more about how maybe you coach the parents or involve the parents. When I did my master's degree thesis with perfectionism and anxiety in their relationship, 2 of the 6 subscales on the inventory were parental criticism and parental expectations, which were positively related with anxiety, as you'd imagine. So how do you deal with the parents there?
So it's really important to make sure that all folks who are involved with the students' learning and the students' upbringing are aware of what's going on. So at Huntington, we have something called the Huntington Homeschool Connection. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that the parents are aware as to where that student is. That parent may think that this student is a superstar and is enriched and 3 grade levels ahead. Well, the reality is, once we have that initial conference and we can show that parent, this is the reality. These are nationally normed tests. It's a battery of tests, and this is actually where your child is. And this is the program to get your child to where you want your child to be. And then we don't just say, okay, parents, we'll see you when it's done. We really want to make sure that the parents understand the expectations. So at key intervals during each program, we bring the parents in for conferences to show exactly where that student is. Now, if you have a child, and I shared the story earlier of that second grader who's functioning on a kindergarten level, that parent might say, okay, well, we've been with you for 15 hours. Why isn't my child reading after dinner? Then we would have to say, okay, let's set expectations. Your child came to us at a kindergarten level. It will take X amount of hours for us to get your child up to the second grade. This is where we're at right now. This is how your child is performing in these areas of the study. So we want to make sure that the family knows exactly where the student is along the way. And again, to build up that confidence, we do something called little steps, big steps. So we really want to make sure that the student, big steps, little steps. So we want to make sure that the student starts to see progress to build up that confidence. And then once the student gets to that frustration point, that level where they're actually at, there has to be a breakthrough. And then there are smaller progression to get to where they need to go. So we truly believe that by making sure that the families are involved, the expectations are there, and we can really show the parents how the student is progressing. Now, I said it's the Huntington Homeschool Connection. So with the family's approval, so they'll sign a release, we'll go on behalf of the family to the student's teacher at the school so that the school knows, okay, the student is getting extra help and this is what the student is receiving at Huntington. And then the teacher will share lessons learned from the classroom to make sure that there's that Huntington homeschool connection. And within Huntington, we are an environment that is accredited by Middle States and Western Association. So we're accredited by the same accrediting bodies that accredit the schools, which means that there's a certain level of professionalism and there's a certain level to ensure that the student is cared for, that there's empathy, that the student sees that this is a place that they're going to help me learn. It's different than maybe other areas. And so we want to make sure that we foster that environment for the student, and then the family also knows where that student's at.
Excellent. And I'm sure you see this a lot. So I've seen this before too, with getting extra work, getting extra help, going to a learning center. Maybe certain kids will start out more resistant because feeling like, or just like a counselor, a therapist, like you need help. It's about solving problems. And like, yeah, that's part of what you do. But a big part of what you do is just maximizing potential, leaving no stone unturned in these kids' lives. So it's not just about fixing what's broke, but it's finding what does work and taking that to the next level. And no matter who you are, like my dad always said, the biggest room in the world is the room for improvement. So talk a little bit about that and maximizing students' potential.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's just perfect. So we really do. And we see a lot of different types of students. And the reason why we're able to see so many different types of students is because each of our programs are individualized. Now we have 3 product lines, namely, we have our learning center, which is basic skills. We have subject tutor, so think chemistry, bio, algebra. And then we have test prep, so namely SAT, ACT, and then regional tests and other tests. So a student may come who's coming to get into Brown, as you said, or a student who's just trying to get by. So what we want to do is we want to really highlight and champion every type of milestone. And we are different from other areas because it is that customized approach. And we want to show the care, the concern, the compassion. So even after the first day at Huntington, every student gets a first day certificate. Some of our students may never have received their certificate before. So they're going to think, wow, okay, this is neat. I'm getting recognized for my success. So sure, there might be some resistance before they walk through Huntington's doors, but when they walk out of Huntington doors, they are smiling. They understand that they're in the right place and that we are here for them. We really pride ourselves on making sure that we're building those skills, of course, but there are those soft skills that are being built, which is that confidence, that motivation, that self-esteem, which is so important for students.
Absolutely. Like we said before, the competence breeds confidence.
Love
and
it.
it's a reciprocal interaction, and the confidence breeds confidence. And it's that not the vicious downward spiral, but the success circle that just keeps moving up. So
Exactly.
that's phenomenal. Now, talk a little bit about what would be maybe three or four tips for parents that they could be doing with their students. Of course, signing them up for Huntington Learning Center. What could they be doing on their own at a young age? Students under 7, what should they be doing? How frequently reading to them? Probably every day. What are little things they should be doing to set them up so they're ready for you?
Well, you nailed it. So yes, you definitely read to your children. Show that reading can be fun. It doesn't have to be a task. And we actually have a program called Reading Adventure, which we're launching very soon. So it makes reading fun. And reading can be if your child is 5 years old or 6 years old, 7 years old, loves baseball. Okay, so read some of the baseball stats with your child. Show them that, okay, the newspaper, if you're old school and you actually have the newspaper, or if you have it online, show how reading can be fun. Also, start doing activities together to really show that learning happens outside the classroom. So when I say activities, it's springtime. So plant a garden. If you're in an apartment, then you can plant a small little garden or get some different plants to watch them grow in your apartment. If you have a backyard, have your child work with you and build a garden so that they see the growth. All of a sudden, biology is happening in your backyard, as is science. As is math as well, and science, of course, chemistry, etc. You can bake with your child and say, okay, how many eggs is that? Okay, it's 2 eggs, so let's bring the 2 eggs. You can have shopping lists with your children. So you can really make learning fun outside of the classroom. And that will really instill a curiosity and a sense of adventure for those students. Of course, you also nailed it by saying, well, call Huntington, we can help. But the real key is to be engaged and also be present with your children. We all have our smartphones on us and we might be texting and doing work. Just step back, be present, look your child in the eye, ask them how they are, say, let's make a meal together. How much water do we need to boil this to make some pasta? Okay, what do we put into the pasta? Whatever it may be simple. But try and put the smartphone away. Try and be present with your family and do a fun activity, especially now that it's springtime, the weather is getting better. Do an activity outside, or if you are in an apartment, as I said, build something in an apartment.
Excellent. Tremendous advice. And now if you had to going super specific, if you had to put a number on it, what's the ideal amount of time a parent should be reading to their kids, and how much screen time should the parents limit the kids to as far as watching TV or computers?
So in terms of reading, it's really as much time as possible. I would say 30 minutes a day is a really healthy dose to be reading with a child. Gives you enough time to get through something together, but not enough time where it's like, okay, I got to go and do something else. In terms of screen time, that's very tricky right now because a lot of schools are still remote or doing hybrid. So a student might be on the screen all day long and then might not want to be on a screen, or maybe they're on TikTok or something. So in terms of the screen time, I think that it's really important for the families to be present and to realize that right now we are in a very disruptive moment. So the more you can get outside with your children, enjoy the fresh air, enjoy the vitamin D, go on walks together, then you unconsciously are away from the screens. So the more activities, going to a park, going to walk, and if you have, let's say, a different activity nearby, like a swing set, go and do that, of course, as long as it's safe in terms of COVID. But try and get outside. I can't put a number on that. I would say limit it as much as possible within a reasonable time frame. Again, because we are remote, so much of the activity is screen time, and there's a lot of fatigue out there, and the results are, the learning loss, the results that we're seeing is just so outrageous. And we really are in a crisis in education. And so we can help as many families as possible. I would say, though, just get outside, enjoy, and try and limit screen time as much as possible.
Excellent. Excellent. And last topic, And I know we could probably spend a long time on this, but COVID, living in a post-COVID world, I know failure rates have gone up from 8% to like above 30% for virtual learning, something crazy like that. What are some of the recommendations you have at this point? Of course, getting outside and interacting and things like that. What are some of the other things that you think students can be doing?
Students really need Huntington. That's number one. The results in terms of learning loss are just outrageous, and the stats just keep on coming and coming and coming. So the key really is to provide as much help for students as possible from an academic perspective. Yes, we're almost at the end of the year. And yes, as a parent, you may want to have your child not think about school, but this summer is a critical summer for families to ensure that their students get academic help. That is number one. Yes, it's also as important to have the social skills because many students have been completely remote and isolated in terms of social learning. However, you need the academics. So the number one is the students need academic help this summer. We thought the summer slide was bad. The COVID slide is much, much worse. So that's number one. Number two is be engaged with your child as much as possible. There is a lot of uncertainty in terms of the world, and children need to know that their parents are providing a safe place for them, and that they can rely on their parents to help them with their emotional needs.
Excellent, excellent. And do you know any of those stats offhand? I know you said the stats keep coming in. Are there anything? Because I always love to have those numbers available for people when they ask me.
Sure. So one district I just spoke to, they're finishing up assessments. This is in the South. Students on average are below 2.5 grade levels, which if you look at that, that means those students they're really, really below. So again, it's a very upsetting moment, but it's a moment where we can help. And we've proven we can help for 44 years. So now really is the time to call us.
Excellent, excellent. And now can you tell us where people can go to find more about Huntington Learning Center? How do they sign up? Social media platforms, website, everything.
Sure. So 1-800-CAN-LEARN. When in doubt, go old school and give us a call, 1-800-CAN-LEARN. We have a website called huntingtonhelps.com. And then you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, all that nice stuff. Our handle's Huntington Helps. If you want to reach out to me, I'm Ann Huntington on Instagram. That's my main mode. And LinkedIn is probably the best. But I would recommend for a family, huntingtonhelps.com and 1-800-CAN-LEARN. And hopefully we'll be able to help your child.
Excellent. And we'll throw all those links in the show notes. And thank you very much. You could just see the energy, the enthusiasm bubbling out. And I know that what you're doing is a tremendous thing. You're helping children. You're changing lives. That you believe in what you're doing, and what you're doing is excellent. So thank you again for everything.
Thank you so much. It's great to talk with you today.
Absolutely.